In this passage, he's talking about how the modes of transportation influence the experience of traveling, and it can produce, you see, new types of travel writing. The first paragraph, he says that modes of transport influence the travel experience and produce new types of travel writing and identity. That is the first point in the paragraph. The second point in this paragraph, the modes of transportation, they determine, you see, your types and duration of social encounter. They affect the organization of space and time. And the third thing is perception and knowledge about, you see, how and what of writing. And then he makes up another point here. He talks about 1920s, where you had the US transcontinental highway during the 1920s. And in that, you see, you had a new genre of writing, the automotive or the road narrative. You had that experience, you see, of mainly male discovering themselves. In the second paragraph, he's connecting two things: travel writing and the colonial discourse. Now, what do you mean by the colonial discourse? That is the British, and of course, the America also, you see, ruled over certain countries in the name of imperialism, in the name of white man's burden. They ruled over India also. So, travel writing is a colonial discourse. What do you mean by that? I mean, by travel writing, those writers justified, validated the rule of the British over the colonies, over the other countries, you see. And here he mentions, you see, Pratt and Edwards said, and he points out that the West, you see, defines itself through the East. What do you mean by it defines itself through the East? That is, the West is trying to justify its rule over the countries, you see. They are talking about what they found in the Eastern countries. They describe those things and everything. They try to adapt themselves to the Eastern methods, you see, trying to show the Eastern people whom they rule that whatever they were doing for the benefit of the Eastern country. So Edwards said, you see, he was a very famous writer, and he pointed out that cultural imperialism, you see, used to justify colonial domination through travel writing. That is, through travel writing, they tried to justify the fact the domination is correct. And in the third paragraph, he suddenly comes to feminist geography. And the feminist geographers, you see, that's a challenge to the masculinist history of geography, you see. Men are explorers or travelers. Women, you see, aren't very great travelers. They are tied to home. But then feminist travel writing in the Victorian age, it talked about female liberation. It was women's development through travel. So a new sense of identity of women was discovered, you see, in the travel writing. So this is all about the passage. Now let's come to the questions here. From the passage, we can infer that feminist scholars' understanding of the experiences of Victorian women travelers is influenced by all of the following except scholars. Number one, awareness of the ways in which identity is formed. No. Perspective that they bring to their research. No. The scholars' knowledge of class tensions in Victorian society. That is the answer. That is the except. Awareness of gender issues in Victorian society. No, they are there. The exception is number 3. The next question, from the passage, we can infer that travel writing is most similar to. Similar to what? It is similar to political journalism? No. Historical fiction? No. Feminist writing? No. It's similar to autobiographical writing. You have William Hazlitt, you see, on Going a Journey, the Indian jugglers, right? Writing about all these things. It has an autobiographical touch. From the passage, it can be inferred that the scholars argue that Victorian women experienced self-development through their travels because women's liberation and so forth. So the answer should be number 1. Their identity was redefined when they were away from home. So number 1 is the correct option. They were from the progressive middle and upper classes of society. You don't have that in the passage. They were on a quest to discover their diverse identities. No, they weren't on a quest. They developed a feminist perspective of the world. No. So number one is the correct option. The next one, American travel literature of the 1920s. You have that in the first paragraph, the third line, the completion of the first US transcontinental highway during the 1920s, for example, inaugurated a new genre of travel literature about the United States, the automotive or road narrative. He says American travel literature of the 1920s celebrated the freedom that travel gives. That is the correct option. Developed the male protagonist's desire for independence? No. Presented travelers' discovery of their identity, they are different from others. No. Showed participation in local tradition? No. So the first thing is celebrated the freedom that travel gives. The next question, according to the passage, Said's book Orientalism. I just talked about cultural imperialism. I told you as a point in paragraph number 2, where it said that cultural imperialism is used to justify colonial domination through travel, right? In this Orientalism, he demonstrated how cultural imperialism was used to justify colonial domination. Number 2 is the correct option. Next passage, this is a passage, it is a little philosophical. It talks about human nature, and there are three main figures. One is Bregman, the other is Rousseau, and the third is Hobbes, Thomas Hobbes. So if you look into the first paragraph, it talks about human nature and Rutger Bregman's view on human nature, saying that we have a pessimistic view of others, we have a negative view of others. Whereas Thomas Hobbes said that everyone is defensive and suspicious, and he said that others are seen as selfish and untrustworthy. It's a question of looking at human nature. Human nature, people are suspicious and defensive, and they see others as selfish and untrustworthy, and we have a negative view of mankind. So the point is, in paragraph 2, Bregman, you see, disagrees with Hobbes. And the point comes up that our negative approach, you see, rebounds at us. It returns to us, you see, the negative approach. And Bregman has more faith in Rousseau, the French philosopher, because Rousseau said man was born free, but it's civilization that changed him. That is the main point in the second paragraph. And in the third paragraph, he talks about, you see, Hobbes and Rousseau, they disagree. They are at two different ends. You see, Bregman, you see, he is in favor of Rousseau. He doesn't follow Hobbes. And they point out in the pre-agricultural period, you see, everything was in sync with nature. In the pre-agricultural period, everything was in sync, was in harmony with nature. It's the post-agricultural period, you see, that people got greedy. They went for war. They coveted, you see, other people's riches or money, right? That is the point in the third paragraph. In the fourth paragraph, Bregman, you see, blames agriculture and husbandry for diseases. Bregman says that diseases are generated by what you call agriculture and husbandry, and the increase in population, you see, led to chaos, to greed, to warfare. That is the point, he says. Bregman's argument in the fifth paragraph, he says that civilization is synonymous with peace and progress, wilderness and war, and they lead to decline. But it was exactly the opposite. What he means to say here is the author's view is the truth is something between the two, you see, what Bregman says and what Hobbes says, you see. And in the last paragraph, he talks about the veneer theory and he compares, you see, Hobbes and Bregman. So this is a passage, you see, about the negativity in human nature and how we look at it. So that's all about the passage. Now we can come to the questions here. The author has differing views from Bregman regarding what? Number one, the role of pathogens in the spread of infectious diseases? No. A civilized society being coercive and unjust, a property-less mode of living being socially harmonious, the role of agriculture in the advancement of knowledge. The correct option is, of course, number two, a civilized society being coercive and unjust. According to the passage, the collapse of civilizations is viewed by Bregman as what? The correct option is number three, is viewed by Bregman as a time that enables changes in societies and cultures. The next question. None of the following views is expressed in the passage except that. What is that? Let's see. Hobbes and Rousseau disagreed on the fundamental nature of humans, but both believed in the need for a strong state. Bregman agrees with Hobbes that firm leadership is needed to ensure property rights and regulate strife. The author of the review believes in the veneer theory of human nature. Most people agree with Hobbes' pessimistic view of human nature as being intrinsically untrustworthy and selfish. That is the correct option. Number four. The next question. According to the author, the main reason why Bregman contrasts life in pre-agricultural societies with agricultural societies is to what? Why does he do that? To bolster his argument that people are basically decent, but progress, as we know, it can make them selfish. I pointed out, he talks about the pre-agricultural and the post-agricultural society, and how greed, you see, entered, how war entered, you see, the post-agricultural society. Let's come to the next passage here, and you have a passage which he talks about the rich and poor, the social platform, the screens that appear in the lives of the poor, and the screens that are disappearing from the lives of the rich. Right? So that is the main point in the first paragraph. In the second paragraph, he's talking about, you see, time on this, on online platforms, you see, they are unhealthy. The rich can opt out of these platforms, but the poor can't. They have no choice. That is the point in the second paragraph. In the third paragraph, he talks about the screen exposure and the negative effect, the negative impact, you see, of screen exposure, and how adults, you see, go into depression because of that. And in the next paragraph, you have the big technical companies trying to influence schools and trying to make them, force them by screen based learning, you see. So there is less human contact and there is more of screen learning. They are doing that. But then rich children, you see, children belonging to rich families, they can opt out and go to school where you have a contact situation, you see. They can go for minimizing the screen exposure. That is what he says here. And there can be more human engagement there. The fifth paragraph is an expansion on the fourth paragraph. You see, he talks about the human contact. And the sixth paragraph talks about being offline after work, the social structures, the no more, you see, so screens are filling, you see, that void, you see, where we don't have gatherings, we are not being social. The social structure is slowly changing. People are opting for basically the middle class, you see, opting for the screens instead of human contact, you see. So I've given you the main points in each paragraph. And now we can come to the questions here. Which of the following statements about the negative effects of screen time is the author least likely to endorse? He may not agree with it. Okay. That is number two. It increases human contact as it fills an isolation void. That is the correct answer. Let's come to the next question. The statement, the richer you are, the more you spend to be off screen, is supported by which other line from the passage? You have a line from the passage. So let us look at all these lines, and the line that supports it is number three. How comfortable someone is with human engagement could become a new class marker, you see. So that is the correct option. You see, number three is the correct option. The next question, the author is least likely to agree with the view that increase in screen time is fueled by the fact that the correct option is number three. With falling costs, people are streaming more content on their devices. That is the correct option. And the last question on this passage, the author claims that Silicon Valley tech companies have tried to confuse the public by By what? By promoting screen time in public schools while opting for a screen-free education for their own children. He talks about that in the 4th paragraph. Tech companies work hard to get public schools to buy into programs that require school to have one laptop per student, right? You have that there. So number one is the correct option. Now let's come to the next passage. And in this passage, he's talking about, you see, an economic crisis, you see, in 2008 that hit the public, you see, unawares. It's a long paragraph, a big paragraph, number one, and there are certain points there. The first point he makes that it is economic crisis of 2008 and people were hit by it unawares. Governments, you see, were not prepared for this kind of an attack, you see, economic crisis. And then he talks about the two cultures of science and art, and the gap between the two is more or less reduced. He talks about that. Greater gap between the world of finance and the public. He talks about there is a gap between the world of finance and the public, and he wants to bridge that gap. That is what he's talking about in the first paragraph. These are the main points. In the second paragraph, he talks about the Western world, the ideology, the, you see, the being personal, being economical, being individualistic. But the crisis was impersonal, and the crisis had an impact on everything, on all the people, you see, it had an impact on that. So this is all the passage is about. Now we can move on to the questions. Which one of the following, if false, could be seen as supporting the author's claim? Even if it's false, it supports the author's claim, and that is number 3. The economic crisis was not a failure of collective action to rectify economic problems. Number 3 is the correct option. The first one, the second one, they are not correct. The next question, which one of the following, if true, would be an accurate inference from the first sentence of the passage? What does the first sentence says? I have been following the economic crisis for more than 2 years. So it is an inference is the author's preoccupation with the economic crisis is not less than 2 years old. Naturally, that is the answer. You see, number 1 is the answer. The next question, which one of the following best captures the main argument of the last paragraph of the passage? I gave you the main points there. I talked about the ideology, I talked about impersonality, individualism. So the answer is number 3. The ideology of individualism must be set aside in order to deal with the crime. That is the correct option. The next question. All of the following, if true, could be seen as supporting the arguments in the passage except, and that one is what you call the failure of economic systems does not necessarily mean the failure of their ideology. That is the correct option. The next question. According to the passage, the author is likely to be supportive of which one of the following programs? Of course, that would be number 2, an educational curriculum that promotes developing financial literacy in the masses. Because he talks about that in the first paragraph, if you remember, gap between the public and the financial usage system. There's a gap, and that gap has to be bridged. So that is the correct option. You see, that is number 2. Now let's come to the next question, and it is, you have a passage here, and it is followed by 4 alternate summaries. You have to choose the best option, you see, the option that best captures the essence of the passage. Okay, we'll quickly go through the passage. Brown et al. Et al means and others. That is, Brown and others suggests that metabolic theory may provide a conceptual foundation for much of ecology, just as genetic theory provides a foundation for much of evolutionary biology. Okay, so metabolic theory, ecology; genetic theory, evolutionary biology. One of the successes of genetic theory is the diversity of theoretical approaches and models that have been developed and applied. A web of science, and then search on genetic plus and identifies more than 12,000 publications between 2005 and 12. Considering only the 10 most cited papers within this 12,000 publication set, genetic theory can be seen to focus on genome dynamics, phylogenetic inference, game theory, and the regulation of gene expression. There is no one fundamental genetic equation, but rather a wide array of genetic models, ranging from simple to complex, with differing inputs and outputs and divergent areas of application loosely connected to each other through the shared conceptual foundation of heritable variation. You can see for yourself that there is a lot that he has talked about the genetic theory. You see its application and as an evolutionary biology, and then metabolic theory. You see, so let us look at each one of these. Number one, genetic theory has a wide range of theoretical approaches and applications, and metabolic theory must have the same in the field of ecology. Now that is simplifying things too much. You see, he doesn't talk about evolutionary biology in the first. The second, genetic theory has a wide range of theoretical approaches and application and is foundational to evolutionary biology, and metabolic theory has the potential to do the same for ecology. I think that is a very good summary. Number two is a good summary because if you look at three, it doesn't talk about the metabolic theory, and four, it talks about the metabolic theory, but then it is saying something which is not there. Need not evolve in a similar manner in the field of ecology. He doesn't say that. So number two is the best option. And now we come to the next one, that is sequencing. You have a group of sentences. You see, you've got to sequence them. So if you start with the sentence, it advocated a conservative approach. We don't know what it stands for, so it can, number one cannot be the first sentence. Number two, many industries have consistently gained market share, the lion's share, without any official concern. Okay, let's keep this in mind, that the new anti-competitive risk posed by tech giants like Google, Facebook, Amazon necessitate new legal solutions could be attributed to the dearth of enforcement actions against monopolies and a few cases challenging mergers in the USA. The criterion of consumer welfare standard and the principle that antitrust law should serve consumer interest and that it should protect competition rather than individual competitors was an antitrust law introduced by and named after the Chicago School. So it should be number four. Number four should be the first one because it is this first statement talks about consumer welfare standards and so forth. And then number one should follow because it refers to advocated a conservative approach, that is the Chicago School. And then after number one, you have what you call number two. Many industries have gained market shares, and the final one is number three. So it is 4, 1, 2, 3. Let's come to the next question. And in this, he says here, you have again four alternates summaries here, and you have to choose the best summary for the passage. Aesthetic political representation urges us to realize that the representative has autonomy with regard to the people represented, but autonomy then is not an excuse to abandon one's responsibility. Aesthetic autonomy requires cultivation of disinterestedness on the part of the actors, which is not indifference. To have disinterestedness, that is to have comportment towards the beautiful that is devoid of all ulterior references to use, requires a kind of aesthetic commitment. It is a liberation of ourselves for the release of what has proper worth only in itself. Okay. Disinterestedness is different from indifference. You see, the problem is he's talking about aesthetic political representation. He's not, so disinterestedness is not the main point. So number one and number three, you see, they are ruled out. You see, you have got to see in the passage, the main point is about aesthetic political representation. It's not all about disinterested. Now you have number 2 and 4 here. In 2, he says aesthetic political representation advocates autonomy for the representative, drawing from disinterestedness, which itself is different from indifference. And in 4, he talks about manifesting through disinterestedness. So the best summary is number 2. You see, number 2 is a better summary compared to number 4. Let's look at the next one. Each one personified a different aspect of good fortune. So we don't know what each one refers to. So one cannot be the first sentence. The others were versions of popular Buddhist gods. We don't know what others refer to. So number two cannot be first sentence. Number four, although they were included, we don't know what they refers to. So that cannot be the first sentence. In the available cluster, number three is the first sentence. Seven popular Japanese deities, the Shichi, Fukujin, were considered to bring good luck and happiness. Okay. After that, you have number one. Each one personified a different aspect of good fortune. That is the seven deities, each one of the seven deities. And after one, you have four. Although they were included in the Shinto pantheon, only two of them, they mean the deities, and two of them, you see, three, one, four, and the last is number two, the others were versions. So three, one, four, two. Let us come to the next one. The logic of displaying one's inner qualities through outward appearance was based on a distinction between being a woman and being feminine. Appearance became a signifier of conduct. To look was to be, and conformity to the feminine ideal was measured by how well women could use the tools of the fashion and beauty industry. The makeover centric media sets out subtly and not so subtly good and bad ways to be a woman, layering these over inequalities of race and class. The denigration of working class women, and woman was considered a biological category. You see, you can see he talks about womanliness, womanhood, and feminine. The thing that is out of, you see, the context is number three, where he brings in the makeover centric media use. Number three is the odd one out. Now let's come to the passage, and it has four alternate summaries. You have to choose the best summary. You see, the dominant hypothesis in modern science believe that language evolved to allow humans to exchange factual information about the physical world. But an alternative view is that language evolved in modern humans at least to facilitate social bonding. It increased our ancestors' chances of survival by enabling them to hunt more successfully or to cooperate more extensively. Language meant that things could be explained and that plans and past experience could be shared efficiently. So that is about the interactive function of language. Okay, now let's see which one of the following you see takes up all the points in the passage. The hypothesis, the function of language provide what factual information. Okay, from the belief that humans invented language to process factual information, scholars now think that language was the outcome of the need to ensure social cohesion and thus human survival. What's the point of talking about the survival here, you see? So number one is not a good summary. Number two, most believe that language originated from a need to articulate facts, but others think it emerged from the need to promote social cohesion and cooperation, thus enabling human survival. That is enabling survival. So number two is a good summary. That is the answer. You see, the others you see aren't. You see, since its origin, language has been continuously evolving to higher forms. No, it talks about ensuring, you see, human survival and identifying objects. And the last one, experts are challenging the narrow view of the origin of language. No, that's not it. Number two is the best summary. Let's look at the next question, where you have again sentences which have to be rearranged so that they form a coherent whole. So if you look at complex computational elements of the CNS are organized according to a nested hierarchic criterion, the organization is not permanent and can change dynamically from moment to moment as they carry out a computational task. Now he's talking about something, but we don't know what could be a general sentence, you see. Echolocation in bats exemplifies adaptation produced by natural selection, a function not produced by natural selection. For its current use is exaptation. Feathers might have originally arisen in the context of selection for insulation. Okay, you have from a structural standpoint, consistent with exaptation, the living organization is organized as a complex of Russian matryoshka dolls, smaller structures. The exaptation concept in the Russian doll organization concept of living beings deduced from studies on evolution of various apparatuses in mammals can be applied for the most complex human organ, the central nervous system. So you have the CNS here, the central nervous system. Okay, that is the clue to your arrangement. You see, the first sentence you see he is actually talking about echolocation in bats. So number two should be the first sentence. After two, you have number four, where he talks about the exaptation what you call concept. Number four. Okay. That is an expansion. You see, number four is an expansion on number two. And after four, you have three, which is talking about from a structural standpoint. He's talking about the acceptation, and the last one is number one. So you have 2, 4, 3, 1. The next question here: machine learning models are prone to learning human-like biases from the training data that feeds these algorithms. Hate speech detection is a part of the ongoing effort against oppressive and abusive language on social media. The current automatic detection models miss out on something vital: context. It uses complex algorithms, and then it talks about flag racist or violent speech faster and better than human beings alone. For instance, algorithms struggle to determine the group identifiers like gay or black are used in offensive or prejudiced ways because they are trained on imbalanced data sets with unusually high rates of hate speech. So, what he is talking about, the machine learning models, you see the biases, the training data that goes into them, and the algorithms. You have in 1, 2, 4, and 5, they can be put together, but three can't find a place. The current automatic detection models, you see, talking about the context. So number three is the odd one out.